the previous videos, you went through the first two steps of conducting a climate change vulnerability assessment, which was developing a list of climate change indicators and assessing whether you're exposed to these indicators. In this video, you're going to look at the third step of the vulnerability assessment, which will help you to determine how sensitive your area is to the climate change indicators. You can approach this third step by asking yourself, if the impact takes place, how important will the impact be? You usually answer the sensitivity question using a rating of high, medium, or low. Let's look at the sensitivity example using the downloaded Excel vulnerability assessment sheet. As we saw previously, when you open the Excel sheet, column C lists all the climate change indicators which have been determined for each sector. Moving across the columns, you will see the different vulnerability assessment steps. We will focus on the sensitivity columns for now. Let's take the same example from the human settlement sector we used in the exposure exercise. Increased impacts on informal dwellings. You will remember that the indicator description states that already vulnerable dwellings and settlements that are often unplanned and without extensive service or infrastructure are vulnerable to climate change impacts. The sensitivity question in column K reads, what percentage of households are informal dwellings in your area? You will also see that below this question there is a rating of high, medium, or low. For this indicator, if you have more than 15% of households that are informal dwellings, you are highly sensitive. If the number of households that are informal dwellings are between 10 and 15%, you have medium sensitivity. And if less than 10% of households are informal dwellings, you have low sensitivity. These sensitivity ratings in the toolkit were determined using the national census data, various health stats, and sector reports. The national averages were considered as the medium scores, while anything higher than the averages were rated as high, and scores lower than the averages rated as low. You can score your area as high, medium, or low for this sensitivity question using resources available from the Let's Respond Toolkit website and your own knowledge or research of the area. There are various maps and indicator tables and reports which link directly to each of the indicators. These can help guide you in answering each of the steps of the vulnerability assessment. Here we can see an example of indicator stats from the website for district municipalities in the Free State. This particular tool on the Let's Respond Toolkit lets you select different municipalities and provides the scores you need to fill in for some of the sensitivity questions in your sheet. Let's say in your area, the percentage of households that are informal dwellings are 16%. This would mean that you score high on the sensitivity rating because you're higher than 15%. You can then go on and add the response high in the column L. If your answer was medium or low, you would then add your responses by typing in medium or low in the same column. In the next column to the right, column M, you can add any additional comments to support or elaborate on your responses. It is a good idea to include comments here so that other stakeholders review your plans and they understand as to why you answered high, medium, or low. In this example, you can just type in 16% households in informal dwellings. Let's look at another example in the agriculture sector. One of the indicators in this sector is increased risk to livestock. The indicator description states that decreases in rainfall and herbage yields will result in negative health impacts for livestock. The sensitivity question here is, how important is livestock farming to the local economy and livelihoods? The answers are high priority, medium priority, low or no priority. For this question, you will need to consult research and key stakeholders to find out how important livestock farming is for your area. Based on this, you can then decide whether it is high, medium, or of low sensitivity. Let's say we've consulted with stakeholders and determined that livestock farming is of high importance. You can then score sensitivity as high in column L and add in your reason in column M, which could be, there are high levels of subsistence farming in the area. You then follow the same process and respond to all the sensitivity questions with either high, medium or low for the different indicators. It is important to remember that only do the sensitivity step for the indicators that you responded yes to for exposure. If you responded no for exposure, you can just ignore the indicator going forward because you are not affected by this particular climate change impact in your area. So to recap, in step 1 of the vulnerability assessment, you develop the list of all the potential climate change indicators. In the second step, you assessed whether you will be exposed to each of these indicators. In the third step, you assessed how sensitive you are to the indicators you're exposed to. Exposure and sensitivity together determine your potential climate change impacts. So if you answered yes to exposure and high to sensitivity, then you can expect impacts linked to particular indicators. In the next video, we move on to step 4 of the vulnerability assessment, which helps you to determine whether you're able to adapt to these potential impacts from climate change.